Together. I hope everyone's doing well, and nice to see a lot of familiar faces here. So, um, as usual, from the end of last season until mid-April here, we've had a number of changes in our organization, and it's been a good process to be able to continue to work and develop our team for 2021. The draft process has been a little bit different this year than it was last year. This year we didn't have the Indianapolis Combine, but we did have some opportunities on pro days. So that made it a little bit different. But in the end, we've accumulated a lot of information. Matt has rejoined us and has been heavily involved in the process, and Dave Ziegler, Elliot Wolf, and Matt Groh have really carried the ball on this. They've done a ton of work, and their respective staffs that that they oversee as well. But in particular, those three guys have really done a tremendous amount of work, evaluation, organization, and done a great job of putting things together. So it's been great to spend a lot of time with them and to go through the process. So we'll try to be as well prepared as we possibly can heading into draft weekend, and then see what our opportunities are, and do the best we can to improve the team. Like we always do, same goals every year. So nothing's changed there, but the process this year is in some respects similar to last year, and in some respects different, as I said. So always an exciting time of year to see new people come onto your team, and for us to take another step in the team building process. We still obviously have a long way to go, but it's another step, and we'll try to do the best we can to take advantage of our opportunities. So, that's where we are here in mid-April.
I'm going to open up with questions. We're going to start with Bill Burt, followed by Joe Kayada.
Hey, Bill.
Morning, Bill.
Question. I think I'd seen somewhere you talking about the sort of the changing of the quarterback position a bit, maybe in terms of athleticism, as a possible run threat. I'm not sure if that's exactly the case, but whether it is or not, after looking at the position over the last 2 decades, not only here in New England, but with guys like Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, Ben Roethlisberger, obviously guys that have had a lot of success, just to name a few, maybe excluding Aaron Rodgers, who's probably more athletic and runs a little more. Why does it seem that the pocket passer is sort of losing its luster, or maybe not as important maybe as it was for the first 50, 60 years of this game?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think every team is, has their own style of play, has their own, type of offense, and so you're looking for a player that'll fit your style, or maybe you want to adapt your style to that player. I think that's the way it is really when you draft, almost any player. If you have a player that has a certain skill set that's an impact player on your team, no matter what position he plays, you probably want to try to accommodate and play to his strengths, utilize his skills the best that you can, whatever position that is. Honestly, it's not that concerned with what what the general trends and all that are. It's really just trying to help our team and trying to find the best methods we can to make our team as competitive as we can, whatever that entails. And there's certainly a lot of chapters in that book, a lot of different ways to do it. But ultimately, I think you want to enhance the skills of your players, no matter what position they play.
If I could just quickly add on, so the way you look at the position, it's you're open to one guy versus one style versus maybe another style, whether it's say someone like Tom, and then Lamar Jackson. Obviously, 2 different kind of quarterbacks. You're open to both in terms of where you're going with the future of this team.
Well, again, I think whoever the players are at whatever position you're talking about, that if you want to enhance their skills, then you want to adapt a little bit of what your scheme is to do that. So that's really a decision that you have to make. You know, we
All right, thank you.
we've had a couple different styles of player at that position, and we tried to do that in those examples.
Thank you.
And just a heads up to those that are asking questions here. I have a lot of hands raised today, and I'm not going to be able to get to everyone. So if we can limit it to one question, try to limit your questions to one question rather than the follow-ups. We'll go Joe Kayada, followed by Ben Volen.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
Good, Joe. How you doing?
Good. I was wondering if you could just touch on Julian Edelman, his retirement recently, and what he has meant to you and this team over the last 12 seasons.
Yeah, well, Julian's been one of the players that's probably come further than most every other player that I've coached, and his development from a quarterback in college to a receiver, a punt returner, and even a defensive player, all positions that he never played, and certainly to excel as a punt returner, as a receiver, for a number of years at those very difficult positions is quite an accomplishment, especially considering the fact that he didn't do those things, or wasn't trained to do them in college. His toughness, his competitiveness, his playmaking ability certainly is it's a big part of the backbone of our team. And I have a ton of respect for Julian, what he accomplished in his career, how hard he worked to accomplish it, and great appreciation for all he's done for me personally and our organization.
Next question, Ben Volen, followed by Mike Giardi.
Hey, Bill, hope you're having a good offseason.
Yep.
A couple weeks ago, we talked to Robert Kraft, and he said he was asked about the draft, and he said, I don't feel we've done the greatest job the last few years. And he said he's seen a different approach this year. Would you agree with his assessment, and what are some of the things that you guys have tried to do a little bit differently this year?
Yeah, well, we're always looking to get better. Always try to evaluate everything we do and try to find a better way to do it. So that's I would say an annual process with the draft, but it's something that we do on a regular basis throughout the course of the season, whether it's whatever period of time it is. So always looking to do a better job. There were some things that last year that were unique to the draft process. As I mentioned, some of those are similar this year. Some of them are a little bit different. So we, certainly use some of that experience to improve the process a little bit this year. At least we felt we improved it this year. But ultimately, we're still going to try to evaluate the players and make the decisions that we feel like are best for the football team. We'll continue to do that, and that's really what we've always tried to do. I don't think the mission's changed.
A quick follow-up. I apologize, Stacy. We don't get too many opportunities with you, Bill. Just a question about the draft process. The college football season was so strange this year with truncated seasons and some guys not playing. What's it like watching film from this past year? Do you find the film to be just as useful as it was in previous years?
No, I think that's a really good question, and I think it depends on the team that you're talking about and the circumstances that they played in. It could be also, the individual player that you're evaluating. So I think that question has some, twists and turns to it. It has an application that there with variance depending on which player, which conference, and the set of circumstances around that team or that individual player. So, in some respects, the 19 film is probably a better, more of an apples to apples comparison of where players were. But at the same time, we all know that players get better with another year of experience, and so there were a lot of players that improved from 19 to 20. as they would normally do, and then there were a lot of circumstances surrounding the 20 season. So it's made the evaluation a little bit different, and just have to try to figure out, what you think the player will be able to do for your team, what his role will be, and what the rate of development or what the process will be when you get them onto your team. And there's a little bit less information than maybe what we normally have, but again, all teams are working with the same general information. So, each team's going to have to make his own decision on that. But yeah, the evaluation is definitely different, Ben, no question. And it's, we've had a lot of conversations about it. And as I said, it's not the same for all players by any means.
Great, thanks.
Mike Giardi, followed by Tom Curran.
Good afternoon, Bill.
Hey, Mike.
I just wanted to ask, based on what you guys did this offseason, sort of an unprecedented spending spree for this organization, the way you spent on offense, is that an indication that you feel like what you surrounded Cam with last year wasn't enough to highlight what Cam brought to the table?
Well, again, the process this offseason was to, as it always is, to try to improve the team and to try to do everything we can to make ourselves as competitive as we can this year, which is what we try to do every year. So, we had several years in free agency where we were, one of the least cash spending teams in the league, and then this year that changed and balanced it off. And so that's really what you have in the NFL: teams that don't spend, then spend; teams that spend, then there are years when they don't spend. So it averages out over a period of time, and that's part of the averaging process came this year. But ultimately, we're trying to, again, do what we can to improve the team like we always do every year, and that's what we're going to continue to do as we work through the draft process and other team building opportunities that may or may not come along during the season, but I'm sure there'll be others somewhere along the line, and we'll evaluate those when they present themselves.
Thank you.
Tom Curran, followed by Phil Perry.
Hey, Bill. I had a question relative to where you're positioned this year at 15. And you haven't been that high since 08. And I'm wondering, when you're selecting a player there, do the off-field makeups and the way he'll fit into your locker room also incorporate themselves into the decision? For instance, if there are what people would say character concerns or maturity concerns, do you look at that player and say he has to be the total package there? And how hard is it, Bill, secondarily, how hard is it to make that evaluation when you're not spending as much time with these guys? And is there a kind of a scale? We don't want him there, but he's good enough to take in round 2 with those questions. Sorry to go on, but trying to hammer it all in.
Yeah, well, I mean, those are all good questions, and they're all things that we talk about and consider. I mean, ultimately, it doesn't really matter what round you take the player in. Once he walks in the door, he's a New England Patriot player, and he puts on the uniform and goes out there and competes. It doesn't matter if he's in the 2nd round or the 5th round. That doesn't matter once he's on your team. So whatever his positives and negatives are, whatever he brings to the table, whatever weaknesses you think he might have, or all the other things you brought up, whatever those are or aren't, they're the same no matter where that individual player gets selected. So ultimately you want to try to maximize the value of your picks, but the players the play are, and you try to put a value on that, and you try to figure out what that player will do for your team when he's on your team, what his role will be, what his level of performance will be, and that's part of the process that you use to select him. So it's important with every pick. It doesn't matter what number it is or what round it is. It's kind of each pick is its own process. The level of talent of the players certainly changes as you go through the rounds in the draft, but I'd say from a process standpoint, it's pretty much the same. I mean, if you get into a later round, you might want to take a shot on a player, a Julian Edelman player that's maybe there's some development in that player because he's going to play a position that he hasn't played before, whatever the circumstances happen to be. But as far as the other parts of it, the work ethic and the aptitude and the character and so forth, commitment to football and that type of thing, those are part of every conversation and every draft pick.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Phil Perry, followed by Yanni Caracas.
Hey, Bill, have a quarterback question for you. We've seen just some pretty staggering prices teams have been willing to pay for quarterbacks in trades this offseason. And so my question for you is, I guess, given the way that the league values that spot, would you ever be willing to, based on your draft grades, quote-unquote overdraft, a quarterback that you liked, knowing that he might not be around if you waited for the point where maybe his grade and your draft position were more closely aligned, if that makes sense?
Well, I think that question really applies to every position on the board. There are players that if you just grade them on what they've done or what their production has been over the course of their career, you're not going to get that player. If you see the player's upside and development and growth, then you pay a much higher price for the player than what his production shows, because you feel that in time or experience or different system or whatever the combination of reasons are, that player will perform above maybe what his production was in college. Could be injury related, could be, as I said, scheme related. It could be, just the physical development of the player. So those are always things that you talk about. It's you're obviously betting on the come there. You're betting on the player's development versus what you might actually see from another player. But in some cases, the upside might be greater. Maybe the downside might be greater too. But at some point, you decide to make that investment, and then when we all see how the player turns out. But that's fairly common at every position. There are always players at every spot that fall into that category that you have to, you're going to have to draft higher than really what they've done. But if you're willing to do that, and that's what they need to do to get the player, then you draft them at a higher spot and hope that his production eventually, reflects the potential that you saw in him.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, you're welcome.
We're coming up on 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to get 2 more questions in. We'll start with Yanni Caracas, followed by Dan Roach.
Hey, Bill, I'm curious about the so-called in-game adjustments to a draft. Prior to the draft, when you're doing all your homework, how many, if any, mock drafts are you guys doing internally? So if team at 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 do this is what we do at 15, versus if they do this is what we do at 15. Or do you just sit back at 15 and at that moment make a decision? How much are you forecasting what other teams doing and all the machinations that could occur?
Right. Well, I think that again, each draft's a little bit different, and so each year is a little bit different. But all that being said, at 15, I think we could eliminate a few players that won't be at 15. And then you could look at a couple scenarios and say, well, if these 3 players are there, which one would we take? If these other 3 different players were there, which one would you take? You go through that exercise and talk about that. But I would say normally now there's less options at 15 than there are 28, 30, 31, some other spots that we've drafted from. But I would say normally something will happen, and there could very well be a player there that either you don't expect to be there, or maybe he is a couple spots, maybe at 12, 13, he's still on the board, and you really thought that he'd be gone in the top 6, 7 picks. And then then the question comes, do you move up and try to get that player that's fallen a little bit? And so those are kind of the scenarios you go through. Which players would you move up for to get? Which players would you not move up for that, you would wait and decide whether you wanted to pick them at the spot that you're at? And what players, if certain players weren't there and you felt like, well, the value of that pick might be the same whether you're at 15 or at a lower position, or again, it's the same thing in every round, but you're talking about the first round. You feel like you're going to get the same player, the same quality of player, or maybe the player that you like for whatever reason you think would be available at 20, then maybe you trade back to 20 and take them there, or take that value at 20 rather than taking it at 15. So, and again, I'm just picking numbers here out of the hat, but the concept is that's really what it is. Who do you move up for? Who do you take if you stay, and what players are on the board? And if players are on the board that you feel like don't add a lot of value, or maybe they're not the kind of fit for your team that you're looking for at that particular situation, then maybe you say, okay, maybe we consider moving back. Now, you can only move back if somebody else wants to move up. So ultimately, you've got to be ready to pick. But sometimes there's certainly been many times where we felt that we were able to get the same player or a comparable value at a lower point in the draft, and so we moved backwards. So again, really all that is to say, I think the best thing we can do is do our homework, know the players, know the board, and when we walk into the room for the final exam, and then we see the questions on the test when it comes our turn to pick, or maybe a few spots in front of our pick, then we have to potentially start making some decisions. And sometimes people will come to you with opportunities that you may not have anticipated, and then you have to make those decisions then as to whether or not you would want to move your selection pick up or down, depending on what the offer is and so forth. So a lot of it's fluid, but there's certainly the scenarios that are worth going through as exercises to think about and to kind of prepare for. I'd say more often than not, the ones that you go through don't happen. It's usually something a little bit different. But you never know. So it's a good exercise.
Thank you.
Yep.
And I apologize, everyone. We've gone a little over our budgeted time. We're going to make Dan Roach the final question.
Hey, Bill. How you doing?
Good, Dan. How about you?
No complaints. No complaints.
That's good. We don't want to hear them anyway, so.
Yeah, exactly. You've been doing this a long time now, and you've given us an assessment each year pretty much. Just a thought on how you would characterize or assess this year's quarterback class in the draft.
Well, as always, there are some interesting players. I think we talked earlier about the draft process. Some players didn't play. Some players played a full season. Some players played a partial season. When you look at the players at that position, I think you see a lot of different differences in the 2020 season. A lot of it's by conference, but there are some other circumstances as well. So it's an interesting class. There's an interesting group of guys, and some have very strong in some skills. Some seem very strong in other skills. So it's definitely an interesting group.
Thank you, Coach. Thank you very much for your time, and I apologize to those we didn't get to, but thanks everyone for joining.
Great, thank you.